Good morning. It is an honor to call to order this session of the APEC 2023 Transportation Ministerial Meeting. Welcome. Thank you to the City of Detroit and to the APEC Secretariat for all the work and welcome that's gone into this meeting. It's now my pleasure to introduce our Chair, United States Secretary of Transportation, the Honorable Pete Buttigieg. Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, Annie. Good morning and welcome. It is a distinct honor and pleasure to welcome all of you to the 11th APEC Transportation Ministers meeting. I want to recognize U.S. APEC Senior Official Matt Murray, APEC Executive Director Tantri Dr. Rebecca Santamaria, the APEC Business Advisory Council represented by Laura Lane, APEC Transportation Working Group Lead Shepherd Jason Hill, and I want to recognize all of my fellow transportation ministers and heads of delegation here today. And welcome to Detroit, a great city in the American Midwest which takes pride in its transportation tradition, dating back over 100 years, from helping to lead the original automotive revolution to the great energy and creativity on display here today, helping to shape the future of the automotive sector. And thank you for bringing to this first ministerial meeting of the U.S. host year that spirit of cooperation and optimism that has borne so many positive outcomes in APEC convenings to date. I think so much of that positive work and the potential we have for success at this meeting is based on the fact that we are all motivated by the same goal, to deliver greater prosperity for the peoples we serve. And that is our purpose this week. We're gathering aware that so many challenges to achieving prosperity in any economy are challenges facing every economy. And often such challenges have particularly great impact on the Asia-Pacific region and demonstrate the region's importance. Pandemic-driven supply disruptions, increasingly frequent extreme weather events, and economic inequality. These challenges don't just affect one economy while sparing the others, they affect us all. All of us are working to address them, and all of us can benefit from dialogue and relationships as we do so. On the other side of the same coin as the challenges, we find tremendous opportunities ahead for our transportation systems to significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to create good jobs and economic growth that benefits everyone, and to build stronger supply chains. These, too, are often shared opportunities that grow even more promising through dialogue and exchange. I'd like to share a couple of examples of where this work matters. First, supply chains. Many of our economies are continuing to deal with major challenges to global supply chains. Some have been caused by the lingering consequences of COVID. Many have been made far worse because of Russia's unjustified war of aggression against Ukraine. For all of their different causes, these pressures on supply chains have made our work more difficult, but we are acting to make our supply chains more resilient, protecting our peoples against the higher prices that come from disruptions, and ensuring that the flow of goods that powers our economies succeeds, including right here in the auto manufacturing capital of Detroit. Here in the U.S., several of the efforts we are implementing will help goods move more quickly, affordably, and with lower carbon emissions, from new processes to collect and share data so that global supply chain operators can more efficiently move goods, to coordinating green shipping corridors on the waters between here and Canada. We look forward to discussing that more in the coming days. There's a second local example I'd like to highlight. Just over a mile from where we are sitting, our department is funding the reconstruction and redesign of a highway, Interstate 375. The current highway, built in 1964, contributed to inequality in this city. During its construction, the voices of low-income and black residents in the area were ignored, and in the resulting design, whole neighborhoods were lost. Even today, the current design divides neighborhoods from opportunities downtown. But With help from $100 million in funding from our department, the state and the city are acting to replace this highway with a boulevard that connects neighborhoods with safer walking, bicycling, and driving, and fosters more economic growth that makes everyone better off. It even uses features like permeable pavement to prevent runoff from reaching Detroit's water supply, benefiting health and safety through more environmentally responsible design. The project was locally conceived, reflecting community priorities, and then our department provided technical assistance and funding. I share these two examples because I believe they reflect some of the principles that will guide this convening. The example of supply chains has to do with us using better exchange of information to make sure that existing processes and infrastructure work more efficiently while establishing new approaches for the future. The second example has to do with finding better ways to connect instead of divide, as all good transportation should do, empowering those who have been excluded and low-income communities as we go. We're committed to deepening our connections with APEC because it is to the benefit of all of the economies where we work. And we look forward to listening and learning as the leaders gathered here share your experiences and your views on how we can shape transportation to deliver the prosperity we all seek. And we look forward to hearing what we believe is working well and where improvements are needed, including, importantly, to support transportation workers. Detroit is known for putting the world on four wheels. It's also the city where auto unions took form and helped to create a middle class of workers that remains a backbone of U.S. economic prosperity. We carry that lesson forward to today as we plan for the future. So thank you again for honoring us with your presence here. I know we will approach these coming days with openness and with ambitions to match the scale of opportunity in transportation, and I'm deeply optimistic about the work we will do to make our people's lives safer, fairer, and more prosperous. And with that, I'm now pleased to hand it over to Executive Director, Dr. Rebecca Fatima Santamaria.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Minister. Honorable Minister, Chair, Ministers, heads of delegation, again, thank you. I want to thank again the U.S. for bringing us all back for bringing us to Detroit and for the hospitality that we've been experiencing. Thank you so much. I will just want to highlight very quickly 4 points. Next, please. Next, yeah. This is, next. Yeah, just to highlight to us the journey that we've taken to come back here. In 1994, the APEC Ministerial in Jakarta, the ministers highlighted the importance of an adequate, efficient, and safe transportation system and made a proposal for the United States to host the first meeting of the ministers in charge of transportation, and they did so in 1995. But following through from the ministerial statement of 1994, the leaders met in Bogor, Indonesia, where they reaffirmed the recommendation and took on board the recommendation for, among others, transportation with the aim of contributing to sustainable development. Next, please. So in 1994, we had the leaders talk of the Bogor goals, which is the long-term goal of free and open trade and investment in the Asia-Pacific. They set a deadline of no later than 2020. So this was the collective aspiration set out in the Bogor goals. In 2020, we worked to take the Bogor goals further by including 3 very important elements. Next, please. The trade and investment, innovation and digitalization, and very importantly, strong, balanced, secure, sustainable, and inclusive growth, or the Putrajaya Vision 2040. The implementation of this vision is through the Aotearoa Plan of Action, which looks at individual as well as collective actions. So we move from the focus on purely trade and investment liberalization towards to 2 very important areas of digitalization and sustainable development. And all APEC fora, including TPTWG, have begun aligning their work in this direction. The APEC Secretariat will, of course, be assisting senior officials in tracking the implementation of the Aotearoa Plan of Action, and we will be ready for our first report at the end of this year to our ministers and leaders. Next slide, please. Now, when you look at what we've done throughout these past few years, we've had the Putrajaya Vision, the Aotearoa Plan of Action, and the Bangkok Goals. These are initiatives which are dovetailing with each other. And this year we are looking at the Manoa Agenda, which highlights and puts emphasis on how we take forward the Bangkok Goals for the biocircular green economy. Next slide, please. And the Bangkok Goals has four specific goals addressing environmental challenges, sustainable and inclusive trade and investment, promoting environmental conservation and resource efficiency, and sustainable waste management. Next, please. So when we look at how we're faring in terms of our impact on the climate, and that will be key in our discussions going forward, we have not so good news. We contribute significantly to emissions, but the point is our share of emissions is increasing. Next slide, please. But we also have good news. We have begun addressing climate change in a very big way. Our reforestation or forest cover has increased. Economies are doubling their efforts on renewables. We're looking at environmental goods trade increasing, and as well as in the financial sector, looking at green financing and green bonds. Next, please. But having said that, we've got good news, we've got not so good news, but the important thing is that we're continuing to work on these initiatives. In a bit, we'll hear from the APEC Policy Support Unit with the 2 policy briefs, which provide policy recommendations to us, one on decarbonizing transportation in APEC, and the other on the transportation sector towards a low-emission future. We are also working on agreements which will include the green economy. And the value of APEC is that we provide templates and model measures to shape the form and substance of our work in these areas. We are non-binding, but what we do is we provide that opportunity, that platform for us to innovate, to come up with ideas and to test ideas. And also, through the policy unit, we present policy recommendations that member economies can then take forward. On that note, thank you, Minister. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I will now turn to the U.S. Senior Official for APEC, Matt Murray, to give a brief presentation about the United States goals for its APEC host year. Matt?
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for providing us with this opportunity to discuss the U.S. host year priorities. The United States is excited to be hosting APEC in 2023, especially since it will mark the 30th anniversary of the inaugural APEC Leaders Meeting, which was held in Washington in 1993. As many of you have seen by now, our U.S. APEC 2023 theme is creating a resilient and sustainable future for all. Our 2023 theme aligns with the Putrajaya Vision's 3 drivers of economic growth, which Dr. Rebecca just outlined: trade and investment, innovation and digitalization, and strong, balanced, secure, sustainable, and inclusive growth, and will help us move towards the implementation of the Aotearoa Plan of Action. Our 2023 host year will specifically focus on 3 overarching priorities: interconnected, innovative, and inclusive. And as we dive into our policy priorities and areas of focus for 2023, you will see that the cross-cutting concepts of building resilience, strengthening environmental sustainability, and advancing inclusive policies are woven across our priorities and our work. Our first policy priority is interconnected, building a resilient and interconnected region that advances broad-based economic prosperity. We believe that creating new connections and strengthening existing ties across the APEC region is at the heart of sustained economic recovery and will be critical for future growth and prosperity in the Asia-Pacific region. As the host of APEC 2023, the United States is building upon Thailand's work by prioritizing the renewal of cross-border ties for sustainable and responsible travel and commerce while building new digital and physical connections to spur equitable growth. In regard to the digital economy, we are excited to introduce the Digital Pacific Agenda. The Digital Pacific Agenda supports the implementation of the APEC Internet and Digital Economy Roadmap, agreed to by APEC leaders in 2017 to realize the potential of the Internet and digital economy. The roadmap includes key focus areas such as promoting interoperability, coherence and cooperation of regulatory approaches, and innovation and adoption of enabling technologies, as well as facilitating the free flow of information and data. Through the Digital Pacific Agenda, we aim to expand secure digital access for APEC economies, work with the private sector to bring underserved individuals and small businesses into the digital economy, and establish APEC as an incubator for next-generation digital solutions. Keys to this agenda will be shaping the rules, norms, and standards that govern this sector, expanding secure digital access for consumers and businesses, and supporting the responsible design, development, and deployment of emerging digital technologies. The Digital Pacific Agenda provides specific practical steps to implement established APEC policy goals during the U.S. APEC host year, which supports the goals of the Putrajaya Vision 2040 and collective actions under the Aotearoa Plan of Action. This agenda is also relevant to other APEC frameworks, including the La Serena Roadmap on Women and Inclusive Growth. So we've already begun implementing the Digital Pacific Agenda this year, including through workshops at SOM2 that focused on digital trade policy, e-labeling, copyright, and creativity in the digital economy, and the digitalization of end-to-end supply chains. We are excited to continue these discussions here in Detroit and during Digital Month at SOM3 in Seattle. We look forward to continuing to advance this agenda through a comprehensive series of events at Digital Month, workshops and private policy dialogues, stakeholder-led or co-led events and field trips, and digital-related sessions at APEC ministerial meetings. And we anticipate further activities and deliverables in this area at APEC Economic Leaders Week in November. Our second priority is enabling an innovative environment for a sustainable future. We are building on the momentum of Thailand's host year and their leadership by working with APEC economies on the practical implementation of the Bangkok goals through the Manoa Agenda. The Manoa Agenda, inspired by the Manoa community in Honolulu, Hawaii, where we held the informal senior officials meeting in December, will also continue the legacy of the U.S. APEC host year in 2011, which launched work at that time both to promote green growth and expand economic opportunities for women in the region. Through the Manoa Agenda, the United States commits to working with other APEC economies in 2023 to continue to build on APEC's existing commitments and work streams, as well as consider new aspirational ones to further APEC's sustainability objectives. In addition to existing work streams, the Manoa Agenda will seek to advance APEC's work on sustainability and inclusion through both high-level outcomes at APEC ministerial meetings and a strong commitment to stakeholder engagement, particularly through public-private collaboration. In line with this agenda, we will further address the climate crisis, promote environmental sustainability, reduce disaster and disease risk, improve emergency response, promote the digital economy, enhance digitalization, and foster an enabling business environment, including through structural reform. And we will also advance women in STEM through all of these efforts. Under this priority, we'll continue to work with APEC members to lead work on green recovery and green growth, climate finance, clean energy, food security and agricultural biotechnology, food safety, and combating marine debris. Additionally, we will continue to promote good regulatory practices, competition policy, standards alignment, and anti-corruption efforts. And the United States will continue to lead on digital connectivity through ICT infrastructure development, open network architecture for ICT networks, and advances in international standards and best practices on the digital economy. And our third priority is inclusive, affirming an equitable and inclusive future for all. We recognize that in order to achieve sustained economic growth, we must ensure that all segments of our societies are able to fully participate in and benefit from an increasingly connected and globalized economy. We will work with APEC economies to work towards inclusive growth for workers and those with untapped economic potential, including women, SMEs, and underserved and underrepresented communities. APEC will seek to incorporate gender into discussions of the importance of equity and inclusion in agriculture, customs, e-commerce, structural reform, transportation, trade, the future of work, and health as a driver for growth. And we will continue to promote workforce development and education, elevate worker voices across the APEC agenda, and support underserved communities through making choices in trade policy which value inclusivity. So here you will see our latest notional calendar. We're excited to host all of you here in Detroit this week and next week. And next we will host the second senior officials meeting and related meetings, along with, of course, the Transportation Ministerial today and tomorrow, and the ministers responsible for trade meeting in Detroit next week. The third senior officials meeting and related meetings will take place in Seattle from July 29th to August 21st. And as you can see, there will be another 6 ministerial meetings held there. And lastly, from November 11 to 17, the United States is very excited to host APEC Economic Leaders Week in San Francisco, where President Biden will host leaders, as well as we'll have the APEC Ministerial Meeting and Finance Ministers Meeting and concluding Senior Officials Meeting. So again, I'd like to thank everyone for the opportunity this morning to brief you on the U.S. APEC Host Year priorities. I would emphasize that everything that's happening in the Transportation Ministerial over the next couple of days is really central to what we're hoping to achieve in our APEC Host Year, and we're very grateful to all of you for having made the trip to Detroit. And thank you, Chair. I pass it back to you.
Thank you very much, Matt. Now we will hear a presentation from Laura Lane, representing the APEC Business Advisory Council. Ms. Lane is also Executive Vice President at UPS. Laura?
Thank you, Secretary Buttigieg. And thank you to all the APEC ministers, ladies and gentlemen, for giving me the opportunity to represent the important work that APEC is doing. I want to welcome you to Detroit as well, and I want to underscore how important this meeting is for helping us to advance important issues that will allow us to facilitate trade, connect communities, create value, innovation, and great jobs that are so important and part of us realizing the Putrajaya vision by 2040. But on a very personal note, I look at all of you and I want to say thank you. Thank you for having taken our calls. Thank you to the staff that sit behind you. When the COVID crisis broke, we made calls to all of you and you answered. You declared the transport sector people essential. You helped us solve all of the cross-border and customs issues that could have stopped us from being able to deliver critical PPE and vaccines. And together, we helped deliver hope with all of you. And I wanted to personally thank you from our company and all the companies that are part of the transport sector. We showed what great partnership can deliver when it mattered most. And all of you are such an important part of that partnership. So thank you. We've tabled for your consideration ABAC's letter to transport ministers, and allow me to share some of the important recommendations that we included in them. First, on connectivity and supply chain resilience. When you think about the COVID crisis, we experienced so many disruptions in supply chains, and we realized so many important lessons from those disruptions. We, in the letter, have reinforced the importance of allowing the efficient transport of goods, and most importantly, the need to have resilience built back in so that we can respond and recover from future disruptions. We're proposing in the letter that we establish a regional cooperation mechanism, and through that, an open dialogue with business to address potential bottlenecks as they emerge, so that policy responses can support true business continuity and allow for cross-border movement of essential goods, services, and I would underscore, most importantly, people, because it's the people who flew the planes, the people who drove the trucks, the people who are part of the ships moving the goods that form the backbone for a lot of the trade movements. We urge APEC to develop a troubleshooting mechanism for rapid response problem solving and identification of those leading indicators so that we can have an early warning system and be ready to respond. One of the key insights from ABEC's work on supply chain resilience is that the physical infrastructure really matters for fulfillment, cross-border clearance, and delivery, just so that you could keep up with the deliveries of goods. We know that digitization and automation in the transport sector can unblock so many of the disruptions that we experienced early on. And so we're calling on you to support new visibility, optimization of transport networks, and an effort to really unlock additional efficiency in supply chains. That additional efficiency, by the way, will also inure to our benefit when we're trying to advance our sustainability agendas. So we call on APEC transport ministers to enable and promote the deployment of advanced technologies to facilitate paperless trade, which was so critical for the movement of PPE and healthcare goods, for using more blockchain and really enabling the utilization of AI to provide that greater visibility in logistics, improve supply chain management, and allow for real-time tracking capabilities. APEC has been working on strengthening its physical connectivity for so many years, but we recommend renewed focus on this in order to be able to address some of the gaps that we saw during the pandemic. We call on APEC to do more to support private sector investment in existing and new infrastructure, and to really accelerate the liberalization of cross-border air, maritime, rail, road, and multimodal transportation services to really facilitate the greater flexibility, access, and linkages for supply chains. And I really look forward to talking more about the importance of supply chain resilience during our next session. But then turning to climate change, one of the most important issues of our time. There is so much that the transportation sector can continue to do to reduce the region's greenhouse gases. We know as a sector we are a significant contributor to the rise in CO2 emissions, but we also recognize we have a huge responsibility and capability to help address them. So to continue meaningfully, the transportation sector needs commercially viable and availability of sustainable fuel, renewable energy, choice of service providers, and the supporting infrastructure. So in our letter, we call on APEC transport ministers to establish the ecosystem and promote an enabling environment that will encourage wider adoption of greener transportation solutions. For example, to promote the use of electric vehicles, that requires that so many stakeholders come together to build up the ecosystem that's needed to be able to generate the demand, build the supply, enable its commercial viability, and support its scale. EVs without clean energy charging infrastructure do us no good, and batteries, after they reach their shelf lives, need to be recycled. The cost of owning EVs is also just too high. But if we work together, I know we can resolve all of those problems. The same can be said about creating an ecosystem to support the use of sustainable aviation fuel, biofuels, and hydrogen. We had a fantastic dialogue yesterday about what it's going to take to ensure that there's a sufficient supply of sustainable aviation fuel. We need to build on all of the ideas that were discussed and ensure they become part of what all of our countries collectively do together to advance sustainable aviation. Importantly, to establish scale, we need APEC to coordinate on regulations and standards for these fuels and technologies so that the transportation sector can make them a part of how we deliver every day. Finally, on inclusion. Businesses in the transportation sector recognize the importance of promoting diversity in our organizations so that we can benefit from a broader talent pool. We commit to working with the Transportation Working Group to advance women's economic empowerment and promote women's access to transportation careers. I am an example of one of those women, as are so many others in our company and across our transportation sector. When given the opportunity, we are great partners in advancing so many of the important issues of trade and sustainability and delivery of trade. I look forward to our session on women in transport later in our program. I'll conclude by just saying that APEC stands ready to work side by side with you like we did through the pandemic to deliver on all of these objectives. And we look forward to working closely with you to advancing the policy agenda needed so that we can realize all of these important goals together. Thank you again for the opportunity, and thank you for the partnership that has brought us here together.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lane. Next, I will turn to Richard Cantor for a presentation from the Pacific Economic Cooperation Council. Mr. Cantor is also Vice Chair for Moody's Investors Service.
Thank you, Secretary Buttigieg, for hosting us here today. I am the U.S. PEC Chair and the co-chair of PEC International. And in keeping with APEC's the third-party role of PEC as an observer in APEC, the U.S. Committee of PEC has prepared a report that proposes a whole of APEC approach to decarbonizing the region's supply chains and responding to its most pressing environmental challenges. While reducing the impact of climate change has been a top priority for APEC economies for some time, we believe that greater cooperation between departments and ministries and among the APEC economies is needed to decarbonize the world's most important and complex supply chains. This conclusion emerges from our review of the 5 stages of production and consumption along 4 cross-cutting themes that impact each of those stages. For instance, as Laura mentioned and some of us heard yesterday at a side event on sustainable aviation fuel, the decarbonization of air transport for freight and personal travel requires the development of alternative jet fuels that in turn requires government agencies from different economies to develop common frameworks, certification standards, and safety standards. Additionally, APEC economies need to ensure that financing and infrastructure are sufficient across the region to effectively deploy and scale these emerging fuels. Lastly, we note that a whole of APEC approach also implies a whole of society approach, meaning that the expertise of the private sector and perspective drawn from local communities will be necessary to ensure that no one is left behind on the decarbonization pathway. The work of the APEC Transportation Ministerial is critical if APEC is to achieve its decarbonization and sustainability goals. Cooperation with APEC is needed now more than ever. So I just really want to alert you to our publication on supply chain decarbonization, which is available on the PEC website, and I'd be happy to discuss it further with anyone who would like additional information. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cantor. Finally, we have the APEC Transportation Working Group's lead shepherd, Jason Hill, who will report out on the work of the TPTWG.
Well, thank you very much, Chair, Secretary Buttigieg, ministers and heads of delegation, colleagues, and honored guests. I'm pleased to join your plenary session this morning to report out on behalf of the APEC Transportation Working Group. As the lead shepherd, I'm proud of the work that our group, known as the TPTWG, has accomplished since the previous ministerial in 2017. Despite many challenges, most notably a global pandemic, the TPTWG has regularly met to address the common transportation challenges that our region faces. But importantly, this isn't just about meetings. Our work is about tangible, measurable progress that has germinated from our discussions. Over the past 5.5 years, the TPTWG and its member economies have conducted 19 APEC-funded projects using more than $1.8 million of APEC funding. There are a further 25 projects self-funded by economies. And I think it's easy to get lost behind those numbers, so I'd like to zoom in on a couple of examples of how the work we are doing in the TPTWG is meaningfully improving how our region moves, more efficiently, more safely, more securely. For example, our Korean colleagues created an onboard training guide to foster competent young future maritime leaders in 2021. It's since been accessed more than 4,500 times. Just consider the positive impact that a training guide to help young seafarers who are traveling through our shared Pacific waters, powering our economy, is making to empower those 4,500 people. I hope we can reach many more. Similarly, the United States wrote and published a report in 2017 in conjunction with their Indonesian partners, helping to advance performance-based navigation for the aviation sector. This report has been accessed more than 10,000 times, helping our civil aviation partners in the region transition to new air navigation technologies with significant emissions reduction benefits. I should also note that during the pandemic, New Zealand, as host year economy, led a study on understanding the impact of COVID-19 on aircrew, which fed into the Thai host year's Safe Passage Task Force and APEC's efforts to improve how people and goods move within the region during a period of uncertainty and regulatory divergence. I didn't have time to mention the many thousands of delegates and experts that we've trained through our workshops. Each of those participants has been touched by APEC as well on a broad range of topics in support of the APEC initiatives like the La Serena Roadmap, the Bangkok Goals, and more. But we can't rest on our laurels. The world has changed significantly since APEC was started in 1989, and our economies established the TPTWG in 1991, 32 years ago. And what do I mean by that? In 1991, Tim Berners-Lee launched the first website in the World Wide Web. Apple Computers released its first portable computer, the PowerBook, which hardly deserved to be called portable because it weighed 5 pounds or 2.3 kilograms. This phone in my hand weighs just 174 grams and has the memory and processing power several orders of magnitude greater than that PowerBook from 1991. So progress isn't just measured in phones and computers, though. It's measured in how we book our air tickets, how companies move cargo, how we pay for our transit fares, how we make our transportation safer, and how we plan our journeys, move our products, and so on and so forth. So simply put, the pace of change is rapid, and we as a transportation working group are aligning ourselves to meet that change. For starters, at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, I'm proud we were one of the first APEC groups to transition to fully virtual meetings. This is no small order, considering that our region spans nearly half the world's time zones. These virtual meetings also enabled economies that have not regularly participated in our in-person meetings to come back to us and re-engage. But more, we embarked on a comprehensive reform effort that streamlined our group by reducing the overall number of leadership positions, adding more virtual intersessional meetings, and focusing our group on regularly changing themes. I'm proud to report that this reform effort received endorsement by all the member economies. Because of these streamlining efforts, our group is able to focus on new and emerging challenges to better meet the transportation needs of our economies individually and the region commonly. In our most recent year's discussions, we've agreed on policy themes that are centered around topics such as unmanned aerial systems and how economies can prepare for a pilotless future in aviation, improving accessibility and inclusivity in new and emerging transportation technologies, smart, resilient, low and zero emissions transport, and finally, new and emerging smart and sustainable maritime services. The best part of these themes, though, and the ones that are yet to come, is that they change yearly. So our member economies have the flexibility to propose new themes as well as when our group's priorities change. And they're also deeply informed by our broader goals in APEC, such as efforts on gender inclusion, where we have the APEC Women in Transportation Initiative, which was launched in 2011, the last time the U.S. hosted. So I was very heartened when my colleague from APEC mentioned the importance of gender, because these types of projects that link with transportation are critically important to the work of the TPTWG. So we've created a more dynamic TPTWG, but we still recognize there's more work to do, and we need our ministers around the table and your ministry's help to make this, help us accomplish this mission. Primarily, it's still very difficult to find economies willing to host our working level meetings. In the past 10 years, only about half, or 12 members, have played host to a TPTWG or a TMM. So I'm looking at 9 economies around the room that need to step forward and agree to host our next TPTWG. So we really need one later this year, and so I hope that one of you will step forward in the coming days and help provide a home for our working level discussions. We also, well, I guess I should just say, we most of all thank our colleagues around the table, our ministers. So in conclusion, I would like to share my excitement for the work that we are doing as a TPTWG. I'm proud of the work that we've achieved and the work we are yet to achieve. So to reiterate what I said at the beginning, the pace of change is ever quickening, but I believe that with your support, we will be well positioned to face it, to share our lessons, our insights, and even the mistakes that we make with each other, and to be a positive force to advance the Putrajaya Vision 2040's goal of an open, dynamic, resilient, and peaceful Asia-Pacific community by enabling the transportation networks that underpin it all. So thank you again for your attention, and I return the floor to the chair.